Hi everybody, and it's been a while since I looked at a GamePro magazine, so I'll get back to it again. I hope to do these more often, maybe one a week or so. Right now I'm going to be taking a look at GamePro issue number 53. This is from December 1993. Awesome cover on here. The turtles were still big. Leonardo fighting Shredder. And you had this guy from, I don't know, I've never seen him in a turtle comic, but he's on the Tournament Fighters game. You can see here it covers Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters. Turtles take on Street Fighter, SNES, Genesis, and NES. The NES version is harder to find. Super Street Fighter 2, Strategy Guide, Pro Reviews, Sonic the Hedgehog CD, Toe Jam and Earl 2, Clay Fighter, Art of Fighting, Secret of Mana, Sylpheed, Lethal Enforcers, Disney's Aladdin, and more. Crash and Burn for the 3DO. System Shopper, which video game system should you buy? You in all caps. Build the ultimate game systems. GamePro Labs. So let's get started here. Okay, first, of course, like any GamePro magazine, ads. This ad I used to see all the time. It's an ASCII joystick ad and controller ad. Table of contents. Letters from the GamePro, Cutting Edge, Special Feature Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighter, Special Featured Buyer's Guide, Special Feature Crash and Burn for 3DO, Hot at the Arcades, because the arcades were still kind of big then, Pro Reviews for Genesis, Sega CD, Super NES, Nintendo, Game Boy, Game Gear, Overseas Prospect, look at games overseas and from the Atlantic to Europe, Sports Pages, no Role Players Realm in this one though, Stalks the Cat, Contents continues, GamePro Labs, Short Pro Shorts, SWAT Pro Special, Roleplay. There is a Role Players Realm, I'm sorry. Pro News, and the Index. Fido Ditto. The Class of 93. This explains, I believe, about some of the awesome games that came out in 93. 93 was a pretty good year. Star Fox, Sonic, Mortal Kombat. They talk about from the big build-up of Star Fox and its Super FX chip. Mortal Monday was here, September 1993. What else? Last Action Hero came out. Home Alone 2, Batman Returns. Sega CD was real big. Here's Chester Cheetah Wild Wild Quest, the sequel. Here you have the mail. Populous. Here's Tommy Lasorda, or no, not Tommy. I'm sorry, Tony Larissa. Bubsy. If you're a kid of the '90s, you remember Bubsy. Here's an ad for the Game Genie. Save $5 on any Game Genie. I wonder if the coupon's valid till January 31st, 1994. Little expired. NHL 94. The NHL games for Sega were really big, and Sega sports games on the Genesis were really big. They were a lot faster because the CPU was a little faster on the Genesis. A lot of sports games for Genesis. Here's an awesome artwork that people sent in on your envelopes. Super Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. These dual turbo wireless game system controllers, or wireless remote system for Genesis and Super Nintendo. Sonic Spinball. Cutting Edge, we have Zool, the Amiga CD, which I never really heard much more of after this. They talk about the high-tech game system, showing it is really interesting. Can Commodore make a run? Can anyone else? They're talking about the Amiga CD. I'm not sure if this came out or not. I'll have to research this. I'm curious. And this is for Rocket Knight Adventures, starring, I think that's Sparkster. Here is an ad for the Panasonic 3DO. This is Greatest Heavyweights on Genesis. Never heard of it. Total Carnage. Cards for a subscription to GamePro. And here's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighter. This is the NES review. Never actually played the NES game of it. I've never actually seen it. They gave it 3.5, 3, 4.0, and 4.0, with sound being the lowest at 3, graphics at 3.5, control and fun factor at 4. Christmas was coming up, so they had a lot of ads showing off the systems and deals you could get. Here's an ad for a Sony Walkman, Game Boy, Sega CD, Super Nintendo. There's the action set, the control deck. Sega Activator. Panasonic 3DO, now at the low price of $699.99. Mad Dog McCree. System Shopper. This goes through all the hot systems of '93 during the holiday season. Explains the technology in them, the pros and cons. This was a very interesting read. Sega Genesis. Back then, the Sonic 2 system was $129. Came with Sonic 2, the system shown here. The core system was $99. Includes one controller and no packing game. The controller was $19.99. Graphics, a limit of 64 on-screen colors. Sound, they're saying it's not as good as the Super Nintendo, but that's because the Super Nintendo had a separate sound chip. Both the Super Nintendo, they're talking about third-party support, had great third-party support. They're saying the SNES is in many ways a better piece of hardware, more and better Genesis games made '93 Sega's year. A lot of good Genesis games coming out. And back then I just had a Super Nintendo. I never got to experience a lot of those. Here's the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The Super Set came with Super Mario World 2, Super Mario World 2 controllers. And the controllers were $20 separate. It was $149.95. The control set, which came with just the game, just the system and one controller, was $99.95. And I talk about the Super NES is the more advanced of the 16-bit systems, could have 256 on-screen colors compared to the 64 of the Genesis. The SNES sound chip has more channels and pumps better sound effects than the Genesis, and too slow. Even today, many games even have slowdown. And that is true. While the Super Nintendo had better graphical capabilities and the sound was very superior, the CPU was slower, so you'd get a lot of slowdown. Talking about 305 games approximately by the end of '93. And here they're talking about, they recommend Super NES has a slight advantage over the Genesis in terms of graphics and sound, but the Genesis has more speed and a better software library. And that's because the Genesis was out a little longer, so it had more software. Here is the Turbo Duo, and it included, for $229.99, Bonk's Adventure, Bonk's Revenge, Gates of Thunder, Ys Books 1 and 2, Ninja Spirit. And that's a pretty good deal for $229.99. Get all those games and you get a system that's really, really good. had I known that fact that I'd be wanting a Turbo Duo so bad and a Turbo Graphics, I would have picked this up when I was a kid, but I didn't. Turbo Duo runs both CD-ROM and cartridge games. It's an 8-bit CPU. Lacks the power to be the top contender because of that, but it did have a 16-bit processor for graphics. Had CD quality music, of course, for the CD games. 57 games by late 1993. And they recommend for a gamer who has it all, the Duo has some entertaining games, especially in some multiplayer cards. Make this the third 16-bit better on your shopping list. So I won't go through them all. They talk about the Sega CD, 3DO, Atari Jaguar, more ads, Crash and Burn for 3DO, Addams Family Values, Lost Vikings, Hot at the Arcades, Indiana Jones Pinball, Outrunners, and I actually have this game, Dragon Strike, board game like Heroes Quest. Had a really cheesy movie at the beginning that you could watch. Ad for Game Gear, accessory, controller, programmable controller. A power plug. Soldiers of Fortune for the SNES. Sears ad. 4 games. Lethal Enforcers. They really loved it. Wolfchild. Virtual Pinball. Micro Machines ad. Codemasters made a lot of unlicensed games. Or third party. Well, this was actually licensed. Official Sega seal of quality. I differ. Pink Goes Hollywood. Pink Panther. Cliffhanger. Hook for the Genesis. Sega Peripheral. Soldier of Fortune ad. Awesome Possum. Battletoads Double Dragon. Ad for KB. Get $10 off. Beast Ball. Looks interesting. More ads. Dune the Battle for Arrakis. Dune the Battle for Arrakis. Battle Blaze. Cliffhanger. Ren and Stimpy Show Vidiots. Rent the coolest games at Blockbuster. Toe Jam and Earl 2, Panic on Funkatron. Oh, this is, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is the second one, I believe. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. Time Killers. I didn't know this came out for Genesis. I remember the arcade game. Look into this. It's a fighting game. Came out in the arcades. If you never played the Genesis one, though. Version. RoboCop versus Terminator. Another Genesis sports game. Bill Walsh College Football. Excuse me. Sonic CD. Lemmings. More Sonic CD. Final Fight 2. Very fun Final Fight game. Introduced a new character, Carlos, and Maki, I believe. And Hagar were the playable characters. Eternal Champions. Popular fighting game just for the Genesis. Sylphie for the Sega CD. Lunar. This is a preview of Lunar coming out for the Sega CD. by Working Designs, available first quarter 1994. Never played Lunar. WWF Rampage in the Cage. The Lost Dimension in 3D. Activator, a peripheral for Sega where you stood in this thing and you kicked it and it was supposed to follow your movements. Don't know how well it worked though. NFL Club, Quarterback Club. Disney's Aladdin for the SNES. Jurassic Park for the Super Nintendo. Wolfenstein 3D for the Super Nintendo. Ad for the Sega CD. That's a Model 2 Genesis with this Model 2 Sega CD. Clay Fighter. I was really looking forward to this game. Kind of let down when I played it though. The controls were really floaty. Simant. Never played it. Super Putty. Incredible Crash Dummies. Jim Power, The Lost Dimension. Barcode Battler. I remember these. You kind of scanned your barcode and somebody else scanned it and you could fight. Art of Fighting for the Super Nintendo. Dinosaurs for Hire. Time Slip for the Super Nintendo. Mega Man 4 for the Game Boy. Very hard to find, this game. Bram Stoker's Dracula for the Super Nintendo. Ren and Stimpy Show Vidiots. Ad for some peripherals for the Game Boy and the Super Nintendo controllers. And this is by Doc's High Tech. Sky Blazer. And they really like this. 4.5, 4.5, 4.55. Biometal. Arrow the Acrobat. Magic Boy. Sunset Riders. Great game. Up to Lunch. Dennis the Menace. This is based on the movie. Some peripherals for the Game Gear and Game Boy. This one makes it like a little, added a joystick and a magnifier. Championship Pool, T2, Super Nintendo, Genesis, and Game Gear. Last Action Heroes, Super Battleship, Warback, and this is the Dinosaur Story Warback, the Disney movie, I think. Family Feud. The Lawnmower Man. Clay Fighter. Really like this ad for Clay Fighter. It really got me wanting to get the game. Pugsy, Wiz and Liz. Bubble Bobble Part 2. One of the harder games to find for the Nintendo because it came out so late in its lifespan. Bubble Bobble, diehard fans of the original Bubble Bobble might want to blow into this card, but it's not worth the effort for those who aren't already hooked on its predecessor. They really didn't like this game. Which I don't know why. How bad can a Bubble Bobble game be? NES games. We've got Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Break Time, National Pool Tour, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighter ad. Some more Psychosis games, and I believe our studio just shut down Psychosis this year. Shadow of the Beast 2, Pugsy, and Microcosm. Jurassic Park ad. NBA game. Overseas Prospect. See what we got here. I don't know any of these games. Oh, Prince of Persia I recognize. How many of these one came out? Arcus Odyssey on the Super Nintendo. Never played that. This game is Legend. Don't know, by Sika. Not sure what that game's about. These little strategy guides that you could get. You can find them now if you look out at flea markets and yard sales. These little strategy guides. Aladdin for the Genesis. Kmart ad for GamePro and EA Sports. Sports pages. Oh, look at John Madden there. Looks so young. $10 off at Macy's for games. Beauty and the Beast for Genesis. Turtles 3 Radical Rescue. I didn't know Rescue. I didn't know they made a Turtles 3 for the Game Boy. Huh. Batman the Animated Series for the Game Boy too. Atari Lynx. Here's a Game Boy Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 Radical Rescue. Gave it about average to above average. Some more Game Boy games. Zombies Ate My Neighbors came out for the Genesis and Super Nintendo. Echo the Dolphin. Jurassic Park for the Genesis. Dragon's Lair for the Sega CD. Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic Chaos. Here's just an ad for all the peripherals for each of the systems. Interesting to look at. Speakers, third-party joystick, action replay, game holder. What is this thing? 5. Oh, that's for the remote receiver for the remote controllers. Rechargeable battery pack for the Game Gear. Some for the Game Boy. Now, as a kid, you'd see this stuff in a magazine around Christmas time. You'd be like, Mom, I want this. It just made you want it the way they laid everything out. Here's an early Switch box. Right here. Just composite. $50. Wow. Get this for like 10 now. Lethal Enforcers with the Justifier. Home Alone 2 Lost in New York. Pirates of Dark Water. McDonald's Treasure Land Adventure. And look at this unique controller. Interesting. The Quick Shot programmable controller. Sega CD, Star Wars Chess. Didn't know that was a game. Dune. Caesar's Palace, Young Merlin for the SNES. Here's a little reader's survey. Ren and Stimpy Show, Buckaroos for the Nintendo. Atari Lynx games coming up, available December. Super Putty ad. SWAT Pro, tips for Mortal Kombat. Outrun 2019. World of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. Wayne's World for the SNES. Pit Fighter. Battletoads and Battlemaniacs for the Super Nintendo. WWF Royal Rumble. The Real Ghostbusters on the Game Boy. Alien 3 for the SNES. Pocky and Rocky for the SNES. Yoshi's Cookie. SWAT Pro, more tips, Battletoads, Double Dragon, Star Trek for the Game Boy, Shadowrun for the SNES, Cool World for the NES. I didn't know they had Cool World for the NES. Yoshi's Cookie. It's just fun to look through these, and they remind me of what gaming was like back then. They're like little time capsules. That's why I like these old magazines so much. Super Mario All-Stars. Game Genie codes. Here we go, Role Players Realm. This was the awesome section I loved as a kid in GamePro. Covered role-playing games, of course, and this is a review of Secret of Mana, one of my favorite games on the Super Nintendo, and on any system, really. I still remember the music in this game. I probably could sit down and still play it and know where everything is just because I loved it so much. I haven't played it in years, though. But they gave it 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. So across the board, graphics, sounds, and control and fun factor, everything got a 4.5. And the price of this game was $72.99. Quite expensive when it first came out. So you can see as a kid, you didn't get games very often unless you had a job, and getting this game, you really got your money's worth. Awesome game. Here's a little tip. They talk about at least twice as many RPGs are developed for the SNES than they are for the Genesis. Why is this? To our understanding, Nintendo originally designed the Super Famicom Japan SNES as an RPG-heavy system, which might explain the higher color palette, better sound chip, and slower processor. Who needs speed in an RPG? Makes sense. This month, we get 2 imports from Japan, Secret of Mana and Lufia, and 2 PC transitions, Might Magic 3 and Abatus. More Secret of Mana. Here's an ad for Lunar. Lufia and the Fortress of Dune. They gave it 4.4s and 4.5s across the board. Another good Super Nintendo RPG. Abatus, I've never played this before. It looks like a first-person dungeon game, like a Western RPG. I actually have this game because my friend had the Might and Magic games on Windows 95, and I loved them, or on Windows, and I love them to death. And I wanted to pick this up, so I did. I think he had it on DOS. They ran on, well, anyway, I played them on a PC. Not very fun on the Super Nintendo, unfortunately. Pro News. SNK to unveil new system. Next generation arcade machine. OMA. At the OMA show in Anaheim. I wonder which one they're talking about. They're talking about Nintendo about violence. And this is an interesting thing. Blockbuster would publish their top 10 Nintendo rentals across the nation. For the Super Nintendo, you see Mortal Kombat #1 in Genesis, and some other ones in the top 10, Captain America and Avengers, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Super Mario All-Stars, Rock'n'Roll Racing. Actually, see Bubble Bobble Part 2 is number 9 there for the Nintendo rentals. X-Men, Spider-Man, X-Men. Here's an ad to order games. That's what you had to do. Order them by phone. This is Funkoland. And they had these things. I used to look at all this stuff. The TV was huge. The stereo was amazing. And you could fill out this crossword. If you got it right, you'd send it in, and you had a chance to win. All that stuff in the picture. Chips and Bits. You could buy these games. Here's Secret of Mana. For $59, they say evil has been released onto the world, and there is only one force in the universe that can restore order. It is called mana. One warrior must undertake a dangerous journey to retrieve mana. More ads to order games, and a Sega handy accessory for the Game Gear, and some game pads for the Sega Genesis, and a Sunset Riders ad. So there you have it, guys. Wow, that was a long video. I apologize for that. Hopefully you can just skip through my blathering and just see most of the pages. So I hope to do another one next month, and next month's issue will be number 54 from January 1994 with Mortal Kombat 2 on the front. So anyway, guys, have a great rest of the week and enjoy your weekend. Take care.